Hello and welcome to Daily Politics program on TrustTV, a program where we analyze politics, policy and governance issues. I am Suleiman. Today on Daily Politics, the conversation will center on the structure of the Nigerian Federation and the attendant cost of governance. The Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, the ICPC, during its annual summit on Friday last week, called for restructuring to reduce corruption and cost of governance in the country. The ICPC said the federal government spent a whopping of over 9 trillion naira in 3 years on personnel costs alone. Personnel costs are the costs that government spends in paying salaries, pensions, and other benefits. In 2015, this was 3.16 trillion. And in 2018, it was 5.26 trillion. So there is indication that this personnel cost is rising. The ICPC further said in its report that, citing the Budget Office of the Federation, that Nigeria should be restructured into 6 regions. That when we do this, it will help reduce corruption and cost of governance. In other words, for the very first time in Nigeria, 2 agencies of the federal government have joined the debate on restructuring. So today on Daily Politics, we ask, do we still need 36 states in a country where many of them struggle to pay salaries? How will a new Nigeria based on 6 regions reduce corruption and cost of governance? And how can 6 regions be brought into being in the first place? Joining me are 2 public affairs analysts to help us go through all of these questions and more. Dr. Farouk Bibi Farouk is a lecturer at the Department of Political Science, University of Abuja, and a former commissioner of Lands and Survey in Kano State. Mr. Jide Ojo is a household name in the development world and a columnist with the Daily Punch newspaper. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure.
Yep. But before we continue, as usual, we'll take a minute to bring you a roundup of politics in the news today. Please stay with us.
The House of Representatives Public Accounts Committee has berated the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC) for paying part of the 9 billion naira it received as Special Intervention Fund by the federal government for COVID-19 response into the personal accounts of some of its workers. NCDC Director General Dr. Ifedayo Adetifa, who appeared before the committee to give account of the agency's spending, said from March to December 2020, they spent 620 million naira. From March 2020 to March 2021, they acquired 5 billion naira, and from January 2021 to September 2021, they got 3.49 billion naira from the federal government to combat the virus. Chairman of the committee, Wale Okir, observed from the agency's submissions that some of the money was paid into the private accounts of some of its staff and queried why this should be so. He noted 2 instances in 2020 where the sum of 3.9 million naira was paid to one Kemi Salo Udimayo for the establishment of additional sample collection space, and the sum of 792,000 naira paid to one Musa Sokodabo for the construction of treatment of isolation and treatment centers in some states. Adetifa referred the query to the procurement officer of the agency, Dania Augustus, who said money is usually paid to the account of any staff that raised a memo for any expenditure. Kwara State People's Democratic Party (PDP) has urged former Senate President Bukola Saraki to contest for president in 2023. The chapter said it has abided by the decision of the North Central to endorse him as a consensus candidate. Members of the North Central Presidency agenda, led by former Governor Muhammad Shaba Lafiagi, visited Ilorin, the state capital, at the weekend. Lafiagi said that there was a consensus agreement among North Central states that Saraki should contest. He also said that the advocacy visit to states in the North Central zone has yielded fruits in favor of Senator Saraki's candidature. Senator Lafiagi added that some PDP members pledged not to work for any other presidential aspirant except Saraki. Also, Alhaji Abubakar Baraje said that the antecedents of Senator Saraki as 2-term governor and as Senate president has given him the edge among all others. Omicron The new variant of COVID-19 pandemic is taking its toll on the aviation sector in the country. Due to the global alert, measures by the United Kingdom, United States and Canada to curtail its spread have drastically affected international flight schedules, thereby creating discomfort for passengers. Many UK-bound passengers were stranded at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja and the Murtala Muhammad International Airport, Lagos, at the weekend. Shortly after the flight cancellation, the British High Commission announced its decision to put on hold visitor visa applications from red-list countries including Nigeria. However, the federal government expressed displeasure at its red listing by the United Kingdom government. Canada also introduced new guidelines, including the rejection of results of molecular COVID-19 tests done in Nigeria.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daily Politics. And we're discussing the cost of governance and the suggestion by two federal agencies that Nigeria should be reduced to 6 regions. So how interesting does the debate get? Because the debate about restructuring is as old as Nigeria itself. But now, usually that debate is about among politicians, among people in the civil service, in the civil society, in the media, independent Nigerians speaking their own mind. But on this occasion, you have the Budget Office of the Federation suggesting this, and the ICPC seeming to, or implying an endorsement of that. To what extent does that change the discussion? Dr. Bibi Farouk.
It significantly does change for me the discussion, the narrative from purely political platform where political ideas are thrown about and sometimes debated, sometimes ignored, sometimes accepted based on political considerations, not statutory institutional considerations. Many people have their views about restructuring. Yes. And in fact, there are very few people that have the same understanding of what restructuring means. So for two institutions of government to make a proposition on restructuring, although they are strictly talking about restructuring to 6 geopolitical zones, yes, is really quite interesting for me. I wouldn't know because economists like Ben Wabuzi and Akwabuzi and so on. Yes, for me it's just a jump into the political arena. I do not think that the argument, even within restructuring ideas, about its implication on the economy, I have never seen it as genuine or possible. I just saw that there is a debate and a demand for restructuring. And that is one of the arguments being put forward. But has it been tested? Why have we restructured? Why are we one of the most restructured nations in the world? If you remember, we started from 3 regions at independence. 3 years after, we became 4. By civil war, we became 12 states. We became 19. We became 30-something now, 36 plus Abuja. That is quite a journey in restructuring that we tend to ignore. And then after the 36 states, we now also informally recognized 6 geopolitical zones. That was an informal recognition.
Yes.
Normal that all the restructuring that happened, apart from the one that happened in 1963 for Midwestern state, was not a constitutional process. It was a military fiat thing, just like the 6 zonal arrangement that we have. But how much have we thought of the 6 zonal arrangement and its implication on our ability to stay as a united country. You know, because most of the time the demands and the debate came with demands and desires by certain minority elements or certain minority communities.
You mean the increase of the states?
Yes, the demand, the restructuring has always come as a result of minority elements wanting some element of self-determination. It has always been like that.
Yes.
It is this restructuring that helped win the civil war, because the minority elements of Nigeria felt to fight a civil war, they needed to be removed from the control of certain majority elements in
Yes.
some areas. So, and I have not seen, I was a member of the 2005 Constitutional Conference, and I was in the Structure and Government Committee. And I got to a point where I recommended to the members that were asking for restructuring, put it in the Constitution and make it a constitutional process, just like additional of state, merger of states.
Yes.
Are states ready to merge into a zone? Can you go to Ekiti and ask them to merge back to Ondo?
Thank you. I will be looking into the constitutional dimensions of this very shortly. But let me bring Mr. Jide Ojo into the discussion. For the first time, as Dr. Bibi Farouk mentioned, this is the first time that you see agencies of government saying that, being specific about the restructuring debate, that it will reduce the cost of governance and also reduce corruption. How does this change the debate? And two, how viable is that argument in the first place?
Thank you. For me, it's getting interesting that we have institutions or agencies of government weighing in on the agitation for restructuring. But restructuring does mean different things to different people.
Yes.
And even though the political elite or the political class, as it were, are not unanimous in their own views and ideas of restructuring, we do know that the current structure of Nigeria is not sustainable. And if you go on a wrong route to your destination, no matter how far you have gone, unless you turn back, you end nowhere. It's a journey to perdition. Why did I say it's not sustainable? We have a very unproductive structure, political structure.
Okay.
And it is, I don't even know, maybe because I'm not a student of history per se, but as a political scientist, I look more into outcome than the process.
Okay.
And my own take is this. When I say our current structure is not sustainable, you rightly mentioned something that we have 36 states, but out of these 36, how many of them can do without federal allocation?
Okay.
Perhaps 5. That has been generous. So we run, like Senator Ekweremadu said, we run feeding bottle federalism, where people come to the center every month. When FAC does not sit, workers in the state doesn't get paid, pensioners doesn't get paid. We have seen repeatedly, it's in the news that federal government is considering second bailout for states, when they have not even paid back the previous one.
Yes.
And now they are thinking of 600 billion in excess of that to bail out states ahead of 2023 elections. Where do we go from here? So the reality that, I'm looking at the political economy of Nigerian state. And by extension, let's not be unmindful of one thing. Even PDP, APC, the ruling All Progressive Congress, set up a committee under current governor of Kaduna State, Malam El-Rufai, in 2017. They sat for 6 months, came out. I was at the public presentation of that report, where they talked about fiscal federalism, all manner of things that they felt, if the party does, will bring about better administration of Nigeria in a more sustainable manner. But what we see now is that we borrow repeatedly to fund our consumption, not productivity. And that is very worrisome for me.
I like the party argument that you brought into it, because we have two major parties now that look set to be exchanging power among themselves, which Nigeria has been credited as a consolidation of democratic development in a way. Now, Dr. Bibi Farouk, you were national youth leader of the PDP, and you served under President Obasanjo's government as his advisor. But the PDP does not have the whole idea of restructuring in any way in its constitution or in its manifesto. But in recent years, PDP politicians, Aminu Tambuwal, for example, Leja Atiku Abubakar, for example, and several others within the PDP have been at the forefront of pushing the restructuring argument. Does it mean the PDP is adopting this argument?
I can't speak for the PDP at the moment.
Okay.
Been long ago when I was National Youth Leader, member of the Working Committee.
Yes.
But what I know about the entire restructuring debate and argument is it is virtually strictly a political argument for the purpose of politics. The problems of Nigeria that we think is not making Nigeria sustainable is not a political problem. It is an economic problem that we refuse to address. And we should separate the two. That we have a political demand is why we are restructuring into smaller units. That is solving the political demands that could consume us if we refused to break into smaller units. That we suspect or expect or assume that when we come into a larger unit that our economy will automatically transform is a fallacy that way.
Interesting.
Our economy will transform if we address the productivity of that economy at whatever level and forget about the fact that we are just waiting for money to
So what are the economic problems? What are the economic problems?
We have not diversified. We are not production oriented. So we are not making revenue from production. We are still on a colonial economy where we are just relying on primary commodities to make money and share. When the Europeans came and colonized us, they never allowed us to build an indigenous productive system of industries and so on that we could tax to get income to run our economy and build that. So it's an economy dependent on just primary commodities, the biggest of which is oil. And unless we change that direction and start moving our economy to a productive level where it is indigenous to us, where we produce to the highest level and export and earn incomes, our economy will not take that state where it will sustain us. We will still be dependent whether we're a unitary system, whether we're a 6 structure, whether we're 36 structure, whether we're even 774 local government structure if you abolish the states. Let's look at why are we restructuring? It's political. Why are we not advancing? It's economic. Are we addressing our economic problem that is making us unsustainable? No. We want to take the fault of the take the fault to the political sphere, which is, for me, is a very dangerous thing to do. We should start putting our thinking caps and say, how do we make Nigeria economically sustainable? With resources coming from an economically sustainable nation, the issues of political demands of divisions, including restructuring, will die down. That's what happens in prosperous countries. You don't hear of restructuring in China. They also have minorities. They also have structures, but they are running a unitary system. You don't, even where you see it in places like UK and Spain, it's a historical issue, not a political issue. So, as far as I'm concerned, we have not yet taken the path of sustaining our country economically, and we want to blame that thing on politics. And it is historical. Since 1946 in Nigeria, politicians will come out immediately after a constitution has been brought into place and demand a better position for themselves and for their communities as a way of politicking in Nigeria. It has not changed from the Richards Constitution of 1946 till date. The 1999 constitution we're operating now. And that is why every 4 years, if a new assembly comes, it tinkers with the constitution. It is a political tradition, and we should take it as that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jidoje, is there a dichotomy between the political and economic argument to the restructuring debate? Are they two different debates, or are they one and the same debates, or are there strong linkages between them?
There are strong linkages. It's all about political economy. And let me, maybe at this point, if I can point us in the direction of what some of the arguments have been. The one that is engendered by the ICPC and the budget office is economic in focus. But you cannot isolate politics from economy, because you are talking of substructure and superstructure. Both of them are intertwined. So your political decision affects the economy. And that's why each leader, I actually do more of padding, or papering over issues. I mean, when you grant waivers to some companies, in which your country loses billions of dollars in revenue, it's a political decision, but it affects you economically, isn't it? So when you set up institutions that are not viable, and you pump billions, I mean, I've asked myself, do we need all these military universities that have been set up? This chief of staff would say University of Army University, set it up in his village. This one would say Navy University, set it up in his village. This one would say Air Force University, take it to his home state. Have we looked at the viability of these institutions? Why do we have NDA? Why do we have NMA?
Restructuring will not change that.
No, what I'm saying is that these are drains on the meager resources. We are in. I'm in sync with what Doc said about the wasteful, unproductive nature of Nigeria's economy. But as unproductive as we are, we have not even learned to manage the little that is coming. Let me take it down a bit. There have been arguments about, do we, for instance, need the size of bureaucracy we have currently? It's a political decision, but it also borders on the economy.
In fact, that's part of the argument that the ICPC and the budget office made.
Exactly.
The ministers are too many, that the commissioners are too many, and so on.
Section 147 sub 3 says the president will appoint at least, that's what, at least one minister from every state. Now, this president in 2015 appointed 36 or 37, himself inclusive.
Yes.
But fast track to 2019, we now have 43 ministers. Do we need as many? Now, each ministers will have special advisors, senior special assistant, and all of that. Now, do we need 109 senators? US with 50 states have 2 senators per state. Nigeria with 36 states have 109 senators. Do we need the number of House of Representatives, 360 of them? Let me tell you, in Italy, last year, Italy decided to reduce its 2 bicameral legislature by 1/3, with effect for 2023.
But Britain is even about 1/3 of Nigeria's population, and they have almost 600.
So if California and Vermont in US will have 2 senators, why do Nigeria decide that we have 3? Then you look at section 91 of the Constitution. It says every state as of assembly will have no more than 40 and no less than 24 in each of the states House of Assembly. Now, let me point you in this direction. Bayelsa has 8 local government. 4 or 5 out of these local governments are on water. Now, Bayelsa have to subdivide each of these local government into 3 to meet the minimum threshold of the constitution, which is 24 state member parliament at the state level. And Kano, with 44 local government, have to think of merging some of the 4 extra to be able to meet the maximum threshold, which is 40. And the argument is that, is this not arbitrarily done? Do we have any scientific or logical explanation to creating this? I was at a forum last week, and we are talking of having an MDA that is in excess of 600 MDAs. Many of these MDAs
are actually 900.
900. Thank you. So many of these are duplicated.
Yes.
They have overlapping mandate, and that's why.
If you thank you, Dr. Bibi. If you reduce is it possible to reduce the cost of governance without necessarily restructuring? What's it called? Reducing the number of states, for example, or the number of local governments, or are they two one and the same?
No,
that you cannot have one without the other.
Like Jide was saying, there's certainly a lot of an element of abuse.
Okay.
in the extravagance of the production of political offices and political units, ministries, MDAs, and so on. Certainly there is some element of extravagance and even recklessness,
Yes.
to a large extent. We might not need as many people,
Okay.
but we should not discard the fact that that multiplication is coming because of our multiplicity. We are not, in a country, for example, where you have all Arabs, every Arab represents everybody. So if you have 3 ministers in the whole country, they are still in other aspects of representation. Tribe, religion, ethnicity, region, and so on. They are representing so many factors put together. In Nigeria, we have more than 300 ethnic groups, 250 ethnic groups, 300 languages, and so on. And each one that has an opportunity to put pressure to the day they understand that they can make an expression, they make demands on the political system. And sometimes it is just not possible but to satisfy some, if not all, of those demands. So the political structure we have in Nigeria is highly demanding political structure, but there is a lot of abuse. It's not necessary to say you must have one minister from every state, but all those decisions in the constitutional conferences came because of these
political demands for them.
For them, because there
And
was
the diversity
this
of the
fear
country.
of that there could be domination, there could be whatever, because a minister does not really represent me. A senator, for example, might not, two senators, one senator might not represent what a state feel it is. If you go to Kogi State and say one senator and he continues to come from one of the 3 major groups, two other groups or more will feel that they have been denied representation, and its democracy is about representation. But that's one side. Then when you look at the economy now, do we have economy that could sustain this? No. Now, are we addressing the issue of economy to expand it to an extent where it can sustain this? That is where our problem is. No.
Okay.
Everything you find in government is about monitoring, is about controlling what is in the outside private sector. The private sector is supposed to be 80% of our economy.
Yes.
So whatever we are thinking of in government budgeting and so on, should not be more than 15%, including security.
Yes.
So now we are top heavy, we are very heavy in political, and we are very light in economy. If our economy was addressing our 200 million people productive, resources that we own and we control, and we determine the amount of monies we get on those resources. This is a very small bureaucracy. But looking at our economy and relating it to the bureaucracy, no, it is definitely scandalous to have such a bureaucracy and such a method of increasing that bureaucracy without a tandem look at what the economy should be. So our leaders and politicians and people like me and him should now look at why is our economy stagnating? Why do we go to borrow to run an economy that can be one of the most powerful economies in the world, just to take 90 or 60% to 70, 75, 80% of what we borrowed to run a bureaucracy, to build an economic base. Why do we go to IMF and World Bank and collect monies for these things? They will never give you money for research and development that will build your industry.
Yes.
If you have a Kamatos tomato factory, or you have a Kamatos pepper or whatever factory, IMF will never recognize you and say, we are giving you monies to go and do the research that will be able to bring this factory into life and make it an indigenous technology owned by you. That is never going to happen. And that is why our problem is, unless we own the technology to build our industrial base, we'll always be dependent and we'll always have a small economy which will not be able to, which our political structure will not be able to sustain.
Thank you very much. We'll be going back on break shortly. When we come back, I will be starting with you, Mr. Jide Ojo, because he's raised many issues, and there are many areas in which the two of you agree, certainly on the West stage that is called governance in Nigeria. So we'll be looking at how practicable, is even the whole idea of 6 regions, under what political framework and under what constitutional framework can that even work out in the first place. So if you are just joining us, we are on Daily Politics, and we're discussing the cost of governance and restructuring as a solution. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daily Politics on Trust TV, and today we are discussing governance structure and its running costs. You can follow us on all our social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Before we went on break, Mr. Judo, we were talking about how the necessity, one way or another, to reduce the cost of governance. The fact that regardless of any framework that you have, the cost of governance, the political demand for restructuring does not match up with the economic pose of the nation, and there's need to do something about that. Now, let us even assume that we're going to have the 6 states, 6 regions. How does it take us? This is like taking us back to the First Republic, more or less, where we had 4 regions, first 3 regions and then 4 regions. How is that going to work out? Because this whole idea of 6 geopolitical zones is there in paper, but does it represent the cultural and the political diversity of the people of Nigeria? Would, for example, Niger State and Kwara State and Plateau State, would they agree to be in the same region? Would Bauchi State and Taraba State agree to be in the same region, and so on and so forth? Even the South states, would they feel that Edo State, for example, is very different from the oil-producing states of the South?
For me, it's just an academic exercise.
Okay.
This issue of going back to regions will not work. It's going to be counterproductive. It will be suffocating. Federalism, by its very nature, recognizes multiple centers of power. And you cannot run, although arguments have been made that Nigeria is running a centralized federal system, and we cannot justify that. But as it has been done informally, using this 6 geopolitical system as a basis for representation, we can continue along that path, recognize it formally in the Constitution, spell out the states that made up each of the region, and then design a framework that will ensure adequate representation and that there is no discrimination and domination. How do I mean? Let me take it from where the example of Kogi is cited. We can have a system that says for fair representation, because our constitution actually agrees to what is called federal character principle.
Yes.
And the whole essence of federal character principle is to give sense of belonging and national loyalty to the federating states. It's just stated in the constitution. So, if the governor is from Kogi West, the minister can be from Kogi East.
Okay.
Whoever is third in command can be for Kogi
But
central.
if you lump Kogi into 6 other states, how do you solve this problem?
No. What you then do, and I'm not. That's why I said I don't believe in lumping. I don't believe in merger. It will not work. You can't. People are very proud of their identity, and we play identity politics in Nigeria.
Certainly.
So you cannot, by any stretch of imagination, even Niger State will not want to be collapsing to Kwara and Kogi. Everyone wants their own individual identities. But let's stop at this 36. And let's now talk about recognizing the 6th geopolitical zone, which was mooted by Abacha administration in 1995 from what I was told. So now represent, like in INEC now, there are 12 national commissioners in the Independent National Electoral Commission. Now they take, it's rotated. So if you are a national commissioner from Kogi State, when your tenure ends, the president will appoint somebody from
another state,
to make sure that, so because these entities are existing in perpetuity. So the once is, if it's 5 years, if it's 4 years, you can have a second term. But what happens is that there is a conscious effort to make sure that there is no. If you recall the argument that was made against Loretta Onoche early this year, that look, you have somebody from Delta, that is National Commissioner Ubu. I've forgotten her first name.
So you
cannot have two when there are other states within the region that does not have representation. So we can do something similar for ministers. Whichever way you stretch the argument, you cannot say because you want each of the ministers to represent their people or the culture, tradition, and the people of their state. So you have to continue along this trajectory of having one minister. My state has a minister, but I don't see him. I don't know him. He doesn't represent me. He doesn't consult me. So, and they will say he's representing me.
Other people in your state.
Maybe he consults very few people like Dr. Bibi Farouk because of his clout. But I don't know him. Likewise, my governor.
Every day of
people, because when you stress this argument from politicians, identity, we don't want our identity to be subsumed. We want somebody. Look at even this argument about having one minister's past. It has generated bad blood. So much so that states that have minister of state feel bad that they are not being adequately recognized because they see a minister of state as junior minister,
which is true.
So when a state say, when they do you now have a state with two substantive minister coming from a particular state, and then you have a whole state that has only one representation in the cabinet, who is a junior minister. The tendency is that you feel alienated, or that your recognition is not adequate. So whichever way you do this restructuring, some will gain, some will lose. But let's look at the future of Nigeria, the sustainability of a country called Nigeria. Because if we continue to pursue this argument of representation, there are representations at every level, on multi-layer level. That's where you have representation. A governor is representing, a minister is representing, the local government person is representing. So you can have a system that will reflect federal character and ensure that whether it's turn by turn, whether it's at every electoral cycle, people are moved. But the larger challenge for me is economic.
Thank you. We will come to that once more. We've dealt with that sufficiently. Dr. Bibi Farouk, he's raised so many interesting issues, on how these things can play out. Some of them quite innovative in the sense in which, but also the argument that maybe it's time that we begin to shed this idea of I want the federal government in my own house. I want everybody, representation at every single level. But you were a member of constitutional conferences, and the kind of real politics that occur in this. And right now, there is no provision for restructuring of any kind. There's no provision for 6 regions or 6 geopolitical zones in the country. So supposing any government, because the president of Nigeria, the vice president of Nigeria, they were there when these positions were made last week. They were in that event themselves, so they had it. So supposing this government or any other government in Nigeria wants to bring this about, how will it work out within our current constitutional framework?
I tell you that right from the beginning, it's just political game and ploy.
Okay.
For relevance, for what do you call it?
Window shopping.
Window shopping.
Or window dressing.
Window dressing, for bringing out some element of bravado, for some people to be relevant and get recognition. This increases our politics of division, politics of identity, and so long as you continue to divide and seek for identity, even if you are from the same mother, you will have a reason to see differences.
Yes.
And that is the truth. So like he said, yes, at 36 we might just stop at 36 and say, okay, how do we make them sustainable? The answer is a buoyant economy.
Okay.
How do we sustain the structures, and even if we are maintaining this bogus structure that we have, how do we sustain it? That is our major problem today. They are bogus because we don't have the economic ability to sustain them. They are draining 70, 80, 90% of our budgets and incomes. Now build the other sector, and you will see these problems disappear. I may not want to be a minister if I am in a company like Microsoft or Twitter or something in Nigeria. What business do I have? A manager in a very serious bank has no business being a commissioner or being even a governor if he likes.
Yes.
If those institutions are strong, buoyant, and economically strong and satisfying the needs of people. But we are running a country where the bulk of the opportunities for economic emancipation reside in government. And that is why we continue to look for those divisions, and they will never end. Somebody will come and tell you that, no, we're not represented. And we're an evolving nation, for God's sakes. Some of our communities were discovered in the 80s, in the 90s.
Yes.
And today they need a senator. And it's fair for them to have a senator. Some have existed for thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, and they will tell you they are not getting sufficient representation. So if you talk about this Abacha agreed 6 geopolitical zones,
Yes.
in what way was it thought on? It was just a political decision in the Constitutional Conference that was pushed by Ekweme and co. And Abacha wanted to compromise in order to continue in power and felt it was the best thing to do. Abacha did so much in that area. He was the one who gave 13% because he wanted to remain in power. He was the one who gave this agreement. A lot of things. People in power can concede so much as long as they remain in power. They know they will manage it. But they don't know that they can leave power anytime, and they don't know the quandary that will exist.
Will follow.
Now, who thought it out? I read somewhere, but I did not confirm. A long time ago, there was a colonial officer that proposed 6 zones out of Nigeria. But his argument was it would be the best way to exploit Nigeria by Britain. That was his point of view.
Interesting.
Now, but if you now come, how do you put the okay, you have 2 almost homogeneous zones, southwest, southeast. Northwest to some extent, yes, almost homogeneous. All other zones are conglomeration of about 250 different interests and people. Now, even if you think homogeneity can bring peace, if there is no peace in these other zones, can you have peace in the country? You know, so a lot of times, and then if you come, in what population dimension, in one landmass dimension, did you decide? If you say it's about fairness and justice and so on, okay. Kano, 16-20 million people. Lagos, 16-20 million people. Bayelsa, 1 million plus. Same status, same everything, you know. But for a political solution, there is no need to take the problem out of it. But if you have economic solutions, you see that somebody from Bayelsa can own half of the wealth of Nigeria. Like Dangote owns so much now. It's not a big issue. because people benefit. It's not government. You know, if he wants to make more money, he cannot carry his ideas and reside them in Kano, where he comes from. He will collapse. He has to take his ideas to Lagos, to Ibadan, That is why the economic sector is the dynamic one that will solve the problem. So if somebody from Bayelsa or from a community with just 30,000 people becomes the richest man in Nigeria economically, nobody will complain. But if somebody with 30,000 people becomes a president, you start hearing to become a president has to do so much. But if the economy is good and we open up the political frame, then you will see that people will be accommodated. All this idea of north-south, rotation, zoning, who is represented, they will never go as long as there is no buoyant economy, as long as the only place where you can get economic satisfaction is when you are part of government.
Yes.
They will never go.
Thank you. That leads us to what then is the way out. So as maybe we get close to the end of the program, supposing so far both of you are saying that there has to be changes to the economy for Nigeria to be sustainable, right? But in order to expand even the private sector, you will have to reduce the cost of governance in the public sector, and that requires political position. How feasible is it, even under the current system, for the president or anyone to reduce the number? How feasible is it?
It is feasible, but for political expediency, it will not be done.
Okay.
It is feasible. Look at the issue of
how
subsidy.
politically feasible is it?
Let me situate it.
Yes.
The argument about fuel subsidy, for instance, is an economic decision that is quoted in politics.
Okay.
Now, you are spending trillions on fuel subsidy. You know it is not sustainable. Your revenue is low. The way out is to take very critical economic decision, which is make we are on the right trajectory, Petroleum Industry Act. Then what is the pricing of this commodity? If we apply similar solution as we did to the telecommunication, initially the price of refined petroleum product will be high, but in next to no time it will come down because there will be bigger investment in that sector. The reason why we don't have investment in the midstream and downstream sector of Nigeria oil and gas is because of the political decision to subsidize. So you subsidize, people short circuit the system. We are not looking at the viability of what is the exit date of this subsidy. It started under Babangida regime over 30 years ago. Political decision has kept it in, and in as far as that is that continues, only very harmful people will continue to gain maximally. That is one. Okay. I'm just giving you one.
Go ahead, please.
Two, Dr. Farouk mentioned something about research and development. Is it not confounding to you, Sulaiman,
yes,
that Nigeria with population of 206 million is borrowing from China with 1.3 billion population? I mean, what did China do to enhance its status among the top economies in the world? It's about research and development.
Yes.
And we have research institutions in Nigeria whose outputs are gathering dust on the shelves. They are not patented. With the ones that are patented are not, nobody is developing prototype, nobody is mass producing.
Yes.
We are not developing homegrown technology to do it. Look, let me give you this other instance. We said Okonjo-Iweala is the DG of World Trade Organization. How does he help us? How will she help you?
Yes.
We can't take maximum advantage of African Continental Free Trade Agreement, African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, because we are primary producer. We export primary products. you mine your solid mineral, you export it the way it is. You harvest your agricultural product, you export the raw material. You go to which other sector, everything is in their latent primary stage. No value addition. But the Chinese will come to Kaduna here, buy ginger and process it into ginger tea and sell it to us at a very high price. The same thing with virtually every other of our agricultural product. So what I'm saying is that let's look at how do we diversify the economy in such a way that we are able to make maximum use of our research and development, innovation, ICT. How do we harness this and make the economy more productive? We should not be looking at our debt to GDP ratio, which they said is small, it's under 5%. What about your revenue to GDP ratio?
Yes.
Which is more critical decision. So revenue to debt, that is what I'm saying. Revenue to debt. So these are critical decisions that needed to be made. For even if we maintain this bogus political structures, which I have argued against, let's make the economy more buoyant through research and development, through innovation, through STEM education, science, technology.
In other words, we cannot solve the political problem until we solve the economic problem.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the end of today's program on Trust TV, where we were discussing how Nigeria can restructure, and maybe not just restructure politically, but to restructure economically. That's so far the underlying agreement from our guest today. I would like to thank you, Mr. Jide Ojo, and Dr. Bibi Farouk. Thank you for coming. Thank you to our viewers for staying with us. This is where we come to the end of the program today. Hopefully we'll be here for you again tomorrow. Do join us. I am Suleiman. Bye-bye.